My name is Jason Walker, and I was raised in a broken home, and my life was full of rebellion. I remember doing drugs the first time whenever I was 11 years old, right around 11 years old, and I I don't remember what it felt like or what it did to me or anything like that. I just remember that it took me away from the presence of problems. Uh, I had nothing to worry about at that moment, and I had nothing to look forward to, it seemed like. So that's what I wanted, was to live in that moment. I remember right after I had graduated high school, that's whenever I met my wife, was during high school, and we had just got pregnant um, before we were married with my daughter Taylor. And I remember right about the time that we had Taylor, uh, the mindset of my wife and myself kind of differed. They were polar opposites. It was, she grew up, I remained pretty juvenile, and our priorities were different, our motives were different. And I remember she wanted to get back in church and she wanted to go, so being, it was in my best interest to go with her to church, to keep her off my back. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. And I remember she came into contact with Daryl, and Daryl preached the gospel at that church, and I remember her just falling in love with Jesus Christ all over again. And at that time, I had no affections for Christ. I was doing my duty as a good boyfriend. I would go, I would put in my hour a week, and I was done. I remember whenever I was about 24, 25, I was way far gone on drugs, and I would literally do anything. I would go through anyone. I would hurt anyone to get what I selfishly desired. That came to a head one day, and I basically just walked straight up to a woman and I demanded everything that she had. I hurt this lady pretty bad, and I ended up getting arrested that day. I remember getting out and how different I thought things were going to be. Not only did I return to my old way of life, I returned to it a lot faster, a lot harder than I ever had before. And that was probably a turning point in my relationship with my wife. We had been married for maybe a few months at this point, and I remember she told me that she couldn't have me at the house anymore, and I understood that, and I had a choice to make. Me and Haley had been struggling for quite some time. I was not being faithful to my vows that I'd made at our wedding. I was not being the husband required. I wasn't being the father that I was supposed to be. And I'd made the decision that day to leave, and I went and picked up a buddy of mine, and we were headed out a country road relatively close to our destination. And I couldn't take you through the sequence of events. I just know that very close to this guy's house, I ended up having a really bad car accident. You know, a truck flipped over, helicopters flown in, to the point of where they let my wife come and more or less say what she needed to say to me before they took off, because they didn't know. Whenever I'd had this car accident, I had some scans done on my face and my head to make sure there was no further damage done. And I guess they'd found this thing that was growing on my brain. It was some kind of cyst, something with a really weird name. And this doctor was pretty adamant about it needed to be removed. The day of my surgery, we're supposed to be in Nashville early to get booked in and registered and all this stuff. And it was one of the most significant moments in my life. So, of course, sleep was minimal. And I found myself on my front porch at the early hours of the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe earlier than that. And I remember screaming at God, cursing at God, demanding to know where He was in all of this. I went from screaming, angry, to almost an overwhelming feeling of relief that brought tears to me. And that may have been the last time I even cried, was that morning. And at that moment I had become broken over my sin, and sadness and grief was accompanied by just this joy that after all of these things that I've just said to this holy God, everything that I've ever done, everything that I've ever said, any way that I've ever acted, anytime I've ever fallen short, that He could hold all that stuff against me. And he didn't. And He told me, look, I'm holy, you are not. And it was at that moment where I kind of saw that comparison of who God was in comparison to who I am. And He showed me the way to get from me to Him. And all I could do was think about the cross and an empty grave and a Savior who did for me what I wouldn't do for you. My name is Jason. I was a terrible husband, an absentee father, and a drug addict. And if He can save me, He can save anyone.